Hi there, and welcome to the very first webinar for the Global DIY Network. It is such an honor to be hosting this series of webinars. My name is Ken Hughes. I'm a consumer and shopper behavioralist, fascinated by the science and psychology of decision making, how consumers buy, why they buy, and ultimately how we can make them buy more. A huge congratulations to the DIY Summit, who have put this network together to keep all of us in conversation between now and the summit. Obviously, I was supposed to keynote an address at the DIY Summit this year in Amsterdam, and as we all know, that didn't happen. We didn't get the chance to come together. And we're excited and planning, of course, for the Copenhagen event on the 9th to the 11th of June. But it's so far away, and we can't leave the conversations, the debates, the challenges, they exist out there. So we can't leave those float until next June. So this platform that's been built, and we have hundreds of registrations from all over the world. I was looking at the registration list today, and the attendees at this webinar and on the platform, we have a whole host of manufacturers, retailers. There are retailers from every continent on this platform, all having the conversations with each other about the challenges we face, about what the opportunities are within those challenges, what the future holds for us this year and for 2021 and 22 and beyond as the global recession bites down, as the consumer still struggles with their post-pandemic values, what's the future of the industry. We certainly can't leave those conversations until next June, because it'll be too late for some of the pivots and some of the agile nature of the business that we need to do. So what this seminar is going to bring you today, I'm going to look about the consumer values of the new consumer and what that new consumer seeks from your business, seeks from the industry as a whole. And then the rest of the content between now and June is a series of CEO interviews with retailers, with manufacturers, with industry commentators. We have a series of webinars with thought leaders from outside the industry, bringing their perspective to what you should be doing. So this platform is going to be the place where you can get this inspiration, the education, the support that you need, but also a fantastic place for you to obviously have peer-to-peer conversations with the people in the industry and get their insights, to have this debate, to have the discussion. And that's going to go on until June, until we hopefully all meet in person and continue those debates. So it's a great honor to be asked to host this series of webinars. I'll be popping up on your screen once a month to host the Thought Leader webinars with you. Whether you're watching this live right now, and hopefully you are, and we'll take some questions afterwards if you are, or whether you're watching this on demand from wherever you are in the world, you're very, very welcome to the very first webinar for the Global DIY Network. As I said, we have attendees and registrations from America, from Europe, from Asia, from all over the world. This is truly a global network of people to support and to inspire each other. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into my content. So my field of expertise is the consumer. I have always been fascinated by consumers, how they act. And ultimately, it's my job, I guess, to be the bridge between what's going on in their minds, what's going on in the consumer's mind today, and what the challenges that your business is facing and how that gap can be shortened. Ultimately, we all survive only because of our consumers, those consumers who are walking in the door of DIY retail and buying the products that we make. They will keep us alive. And so it's important for us to understand what they need from us as a business. And so I'm going to take you through a journey for the next 35, 40 minutes on the new values of this post-pandemic consumer, because some things have changed and some things remain the same. So I'm going to give you a screen share here. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see a couple of PowerPoint slides that I've put together. When I say a couple, I mean a lot, of course. And hopefully you can see that on your screen right now. So I've called this the captive economy, because I think what's amazing about what's happened is that we have a captive nature. I did a lot of reading and understanding about kidnapping, about slave trade, but imprisonment in the beginning, because actually there's some values, there are some things that happen when your freedoms are taken away that actually have an effect on you as a consumer. So I called it the captive economy because I think we are all captives at the moment. We're captive in our homes, depending on where you are listening to this in the world. You may be at various levels of lockdown and sheltering. And also our businesses are held captive by a global recession kind of breathing down our necks, but also by a changed consumer behavior, by an uncertainty. So we are very much in a captive place, in a captive bubble, if you like. So what's going to be the future for us? Well, it's a great question, isn't it? The first thing I want to say to you about webinars and about digital consumption is that I want you right now to take up a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. Wherever you're watching this, as I said, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching on demand, it's really important you take some notes. There's actually the picture there is a person who was on a webinar with me last week and took 12 pages of notes. I thought, oh my God, that's gold star level. You don't need to take 12 pages, but trust me, I think we can get very relaxed watching webinar and we can kind of drift into a Netflix type of kind of consumption moment, as opposed to actually keeping the pen on the paper and writing down, well, what do these new values mean for my business? what does what he's just said mean for what's something that we could do? So I want to try and hopefully turn some of this inspiration and content into some action for your business, because ultimately that way, at the end of this 45 minutes, you'll walk away with a couple of pages of action points to the business, which is really what this platform is all about. It's about building inspiration to be able to action things in the business. So I want to talk about consumers, and I want to talk about getting some insight into what's happening in their lives, to unmask them and to understand a little bit what's going on behind that mask. What is going on behind their eyes, behind the mask, and how we can use that to be ultimately a more relevant industry to them and what they're going through, and to future-proof our business. I often talk about disruptive change. I've been talking about disruption for nearly 8-10 years on the international conference circuit. Most of that disruption conversation has been around technology and also about consumer behavior because of technology. But ultimately, of course, we've had the most disruptive life event and economic event and social disruption ever that we've ever experienced in the last 6 to 9 months. So I want to start today by talking about change. And I want to bring you back to school, to high school physics, to your first year in high school physics. Maybe you were 12, 13 years old, and you learned about Newton's law of motion. And Newton's law of motion was pretty simple. There are natural forces. So if you're this guy trying to push this ball up the hill, there's natural forces pressing against you. It's gravity, and it's the mass of the ball. The mass of the ball combined with gravity is pushing down. That's the natural force on you. So if you want to move that ball up the hill, you have to apply a greater force, which is an applied force, against the natural forces, and then the ball will move. If you want to hold the ball still, you have to apply an equal force. So equal and greater force, that was Newton's law. So if you take that and look at disruptive change through the same lens, there are natural changes pressing down on your business, on your industry, and they always will, by the way. There'll be technological, there'll be economic, political, social, all sorts of change, and change will always be there. That Chinese expression, change is the only constant. So the natural changes will always press down. But if you want to move your business forward, if you want to move the industry forward, you of course have to apply a greater force against those changes. So you have to bring it. You have to watch what the changes are, but you have to apply the greater force against change. Otherwise, change crushes businesses. And that's where we are today. We're looking at so much change going on in the world. We have to engage and really push back and apply a greater force of change. And of course, at the moment, we have what I call disruption to the power of C19. We have COVID-19 disruption touching every single part of the world, not only geographically, but also economically, politically, socially. Our healthcare systems, everything is up for grabs and everything is changing. And therefore, we have to push back hard against those changes. And the changes are happening so fast. I love this quote, I always have: standing still is the fastest way of moving backwards in a rapidly changing world. This idea that if the world is changing around you so fast, even if you stand still and think that's okay, you actually end up moving backwards because the world around you is moving forwards so fast. And that's what's happening right now. The world is changing. And if you decide to leave your business model the same, if you decide to leave the way store operations are running the same, if you intend to keep your brand development running the same, huge mistake. Because the world is changing so fast around you, you have to move and press down on these changes and these forces really quite fast. That old expression, old ways of working won't open any new doors. It's never been more true than it is today. And of course, the pandemic brings opportunity. I love these images that came out of Japan originally when they had their first lockdown. Nature takes over and you have these wild deer taking over the streets. We all saw what happened to pollution all over the world when we stopped moving, when all the airlines stopped traveling, world pollution was far, far less. There were good things about the pandemic. Here's a really interesting good news story. So Etsy posted its results for Q2 recently. It's had one of its most successful Q2s ever because of homemade face masks. So, so many people were locked in April and May, nothing to do. All the craft people turned to making face masks. It was a huge PPE problem. And so Etsy has enjoyed a massive bump in terms of its sales. So there have been winners in the pandemic, of course, but a lot of us were losers. And a lot of retail has been lost. Now, DIY obviously was seen as essential for a lot of the countries, and so wasn't maybe closed as early as some of the other retail. But ultimately, we had an economic 404 error. Economy not found. We had a huge economic shutdown globally, and we're still recovering from that. We're still crawling out of it. Some countries are moving back in. It's kind of a little bit of a yo-yo effect now as wave 2 comes up, and we're starting to see restrictions country by country, cities locking down again, retail locking down again. We're not out of this. So we're inside it. We're inside the pandemic. And from a consumer point of view, this is really interesting because this is the challenge. This is how, in one image there, that's how consumers are feeling. And they're still feeling, even though we had maybe 8, 10, 12 weeks of actual kind of house arrest. Even though people are out and about now a little bit more, they still feel like what this image says. They feel isolated, they feel lonely, they feel trapped. And you remember the beginning of the pandemic, how people reacted when there was no PPE. These are images, I think, from Spain. People shopping in supermarket and DIY environments, with homemade PPE. People can be so creative. It's amazing. And then we were all told to work from home, and that was easy for some of us in white collar. For other people like pilots, archaeologists, my favorite one here is the lifeguard trying to work from home. It's not easy for everybody working from home. And of course, if those of you who have children know that, if the scientists don't work out the vaccine, we as parents will work out the vaccine soon, because God damn it, my children are going back to school. It was difficult working from home with kids, and we all saw images like this on our social media where parents playfully tried to retain their children. Because if you don't look after your children while you're working, they will do crazy stuff. We all know if you leave your children unattended, they will find mischief. And then maybe you try and give them something to do. You say, do some coloring, but you don't specify what exactly to color, and this is what you get. And my favorite image, I think, of the whole pandemic was this lady on a Zoom call at work, and her 5-year-old squatting on the dining table as a superhero just behind her. So it's challenging. Consumers have been through a challenging time. I think that's really important, because it actually brings opportunity to us if we get the conversation right with our customers. In terms of recovery, of course, people would like a V-shaped recovery. We're used to V-shaped recoveries in the stock market, and we like, in economic terms, and certainly as business people, we love the idea of V-shaped recoveries. When things go bad, that we do something quickly and then that we correct that and we go. So anyone who's looking at this, from any salespeople watching this today, you love the V-shape, that idea. And when this pandemic first hit, we all, I think, fell in love with the idea this would be a short-term thing and there would be a V-shaped recovery. But of course, we know now there will be no V-shaped recovery. In fact, I was looking for a shape for the recovery, and I settled on this one. This is an old Irish, if you haven't picked up on the accent yet, that's where I'm from Ireland. And this is an old Irish rowing boat called a currach, and they're used off the west of Ireland in the wild Atlantic waves to be a stable fishing boat, an old traditional fishing boat. But it's got a very shallow base, quite a sharp stern and a sharp bow. And so when I looked at the shape of the recovery, this is what we're looking at. We had the initial 6 months, which was the now, the kind of complete collapse. Then we had the then, which is where we're now. If you watch that little blue dot, that was the first 6 or 9 months. We're now pushing into the then phase, which is this very slow recovery. And maybe in 2022, 2023, when we have global vaccines, if they come good for us, will be when we recover. So this is a very elongated recovery. And even since I've designed this slide, I've been thinking only recently, maybe we're not even looking at a continuous line. Maybe this is going to be a bit more roller coaster, Maybe we're going to ebb and flow and go backwards before we go forwards. And so it's a very, very loose recovery shape, I think. And then during the summer, I was thinking about riptides. I was on the beach with my kids, and there was a sign, saying "Riptides beware." I thought, this is a really good metaphor for what's happening too, because you get carried out really fast by a riptide. And that's what's happened to us in the pandemic. Businesses collapse. And most people's immediate reaction, if they're caught in a riptide, is to, of course, fight the current and swim. And they swim so hard to try and get back to the shore, but they're swimming directly against the current. And you're never going to win against the ocean. The lifeguards teach you, if you ever get caught in a rip current, to swim sideways, to swim out of the current, and then return back to shore. Because then, once you swim out of the current, you're free to return to where you know. I think what we need to learn here in the pandemic is, for the first, stop doing what we've always done. Stop trying to swim against the tide. You can't beat a pandemic. So learn to move in different directions. Learn to maybe go off in a direction that feels unnatural to you, maybe even, because you want to get back to shore. But maybe if you go that way, you will find a new business model, new opportunities. I think it's a really good metaphor. We need to be far more agile in the way we run our businesses, the way we structure our businesses, the way we plan for the future, because the future is so uncertain. Agility actually has become nearly, I would say, a competitive advantage to a business. So here's a note for you to write down. Ask yourself how agile your business is, how quickly you can pivot, how quickly you can redeploy people, talent, how quickly you can acquire new talent, how quickly can you look at those product development, look at those store development plans. We have to get much, much faster at how we're doing things. And this is where I think it's difficult for us, because a lot of us are working from home still, and maybe we don't have the motivation that we need, but really this is the moment where you as a manager or a leader of your team really need to reach in and rip out that superhero cloak. Because this is the moment where you've got to bring innovation, bring creativity to how we run our businesses, how we run our industry. And innovation isn't a word that's been used a lot at the moment. A lot of the time we're talking about operational excellence, and we're talking about just keeping going, kind of treading water, trying to keep things going. No, no, no. This is the time where we actually have to bring some serious thought. We have to look for the opportunity in every crisis. And I had a lovely example during the lockdown. And every business, of course, was affected in a negative way. And here's one thing to think about that, isn't nothing to do with DIY. To do with the zoo. Imagine if you owned a zoo. During initial lockdown and sheltering, of course, nobody could come to your zoo. You have to close it, so you have no revenue. You have no ticket sales, no school tours, but all the animals still need to be fed and looked after and vets. And so you've got the costs, but none of the revenue. What do you do? Now, that's a crisis. What I loved about this, the one example, is a farm called Sweet Farm in California. It's an animal sanctuary. And again, remember, they make all the money by people visiting, but now they have no money, no visitors. What do? Well, they go out and they pick themselves up and they look at the world and they say, well, what are people doing? What do people need? What do we have? And how can we put those two things together? And so what they did is they launched a product called, I love this, Goat to Meeting. So everyone was doing Zoom calls and business and personal. And for $65, you could hire live an alpaca or a goat to come up in your Zoom meeting. And this was like a crazy idea, but people loved it. And so what they did, they ended up having all their staff out and about with tablets and phones, filming live alpacas and goats who were then popping up into Zoom meetings all over the world. They made more money selling goats on live Zooms than they ever did on ticket sales. And this is an example of, understanding how the world's moving digitally, understanding what you have and how you make money out of what you have can be so many different answers and solutions. So this is the kind of creativity we need to bring to our business challenges. Just because it worked for you last year or for the last 10 years or for the last 100 years does not mean that it'll work for the next year or the future post-pandemic. Look what happened in restaurants. Again, lots of restaurants, they closed and they did takeaway. It's kind of an obvious pivot. But then some restaurants went one step further and started doing meal solutions, raw, that you could choose from their menu and have delivered to your home. And now they find themselves in a post-pandemic world where they only used to make money between, let's say, maybe 8 p.m. and 12 p.m. doing dinner, sit-down dinner. They now have takeaway business, which is maybe 10, 15% of their business extra. But they also have a meal solution business, which brings their chefs in at 10 a.m. And they're prepping all day, making meal boxes, and they go off into the community, get sent to homes all over the county or the towns or the cities. And now they have 3 income sources where they only had 1 before. Do you think that they would shut those 2 income sources down post-pandemic? Of course not. So the pandemic is actually forcing people to choose new business models, choose new ways of working, and utilize assets. Think about that kitchen that was never being used between 10 a.m. and maybe 2 or 3 p.m. before, whereas now it's utilized. It was an asset that was there, it's resting. So we need to look at ways to utilize all our assets, but never lose sight of customer experience. These are images from Starbucks and from cafes in Wuhan shortly after the pandemic, because they were the first to get into this idea, of course, of social distancing. Now think about having a coffee. Think about how that girl in the center image feels right now. Oh, she's having a great time. So would you want to go there and have coffee? I wouldn't. It's dismal, Then restaurants tried to get kind of the hang of this. This is a restaurant in Michigan in the States. And they put mannequins around the place to try and kind of fill the tables that they had to leave empty. And okay, it's funny. I would think it's entertaining if I went there to dine. A little bit creepy, but it's getting there. Then this one in Germany, this cafe in Germany, when they opened, gave everyone these pool noodle hats to keep them. And that was, I liked that. That's fun. That's a fun way. And people like that. They share the story. And so you can meet the regulations, but also you can have some fun with it and make, remember, we're all humans. And this is my favorite one. This is from a cafe in Paris who did the same thing, social distancing with teddies. And that to me in a picture is a creative way of meeting the regulation. I see so many jaded, boring regulation meets in retail. And any retailer watching this, and I know we have a huge number of retailers on the platform, which is fantastic. I would challenge you to walk your stores and look at, yes, we have to meet regulations, but can we do it in a humane way? Can we do it in a mischievous way? Can we do it in a playful way? Can we do it in a human way, ultimately? So I think that's a great example. Here's a cafe or a bar in America, and this is the early pandemic when social distancing was really important. They gave everyone tube tables to use, and you sat on your table and you had your beer and you kept it, and it's just crazy, but yeah, some fun. And then here's the miserable side of it. These are scenes from France. I don't think I've ever seen more depressing, sad imagery in my life. I mean, look at those children at school, in the playground, at recess. It's not a life, So this is the danger of customer experience being eroded by regulation. And it's important that we don't let this happen to our retail experiences, and we keep that positivity and restore love. Here's Disney in Shanghai. Let's go to Disney, kids. Yeah, let's go, but let's all stand in these yellow squares and not move. No, let's not. Let's stay at home. Here's a nightclub in the Netherlands. I mean, this is this is a real image. Like, this is them coping with their new regulations. This is a socially distant nightclub listening to a DJ. Now ask yourself, would you want to go to that nightclub and just sit there, whoop, whoop? I mean, that's, so they've taken all the core product of what a nightclub is away there. A nightclub is the dancing, a nightclub is the meeting new people. So that's not going to do it for you, is it? So it's a disaster. Here's a drive-in concert in Germany. And again, think about this. If you're in the first row or two there, you're probably having a great time. If you're in row 6, 7, 10, 12, you may as well be in the local town car park. You see nothing. So the idea was good, but the execution, no, it's not good enough. But then there are people who are doing a win-win. I want to show you this video. This to me is the ultimate, again, going back to that sweet farm, animal farm sanctuary thing. Talking about creativity, this is a win-win here. So this is in Ukraine. This is a concert. How do you have a concert when you're not allowed people mingle? When you do it up against this, what's called a vertical concert. So they did it right up against a hotel. The hotel sold every single bedroom in their high-rise hotel. Every hotel bedroom was sold to 6 people. 6 people could sit in the balcony and watch the concert. And they could also stay the night and use the hotel room. They could bring their own beer. And so you've got a socially distant concert. The consumers are happy because they're getting an event. God, we all love to go to festivals and events. The band are happy and the promoter are happy because they're revenue. The hotel is happy because they're full. It's a win-win-win. Have a look at this. Because that's what we're trying to capture. We're trying to get people back to a place where they smile, and they enjoy, and then they attach that emotion to our brand. And at the moment we have, we're queuing for living, we're queuing everywhere, we're queuing all over the world for wet markets, for DIY, for supermarket. The bottom left, or the bottom right image there is a queue for McDonald's the day it opened, so people could get their first Big Mac. We queue to get into DIY. And I want to talk to you about the values of the new captive economy consumer. Because those values, if we understand, I'm only going to touch on maybe 3 or 4 here today. If we understand those values, then I think we can really start to make sure our businesses are still relevant to the modern consumer. And the first one I want to talk about as the captive consumer is freedom and autonomy. So this is going back to the work I did originally on captivity and imprisonment and slavery, and looking at the psychology of captivity and the psychology of the uncertainty of what consumers are going through, and fear and anxiety and all those things, and how they present then in consumer behaviors and how we can help our consumers. So ultimately, let's go back to freedom. Freedom is our right. It's our democratic right. We have whole democracies built on it. We have our global opinion is that we should be free to do what we want to do within the law, obviously. But freedom is inherent in we teach our children from a very early age, choose what you want, be whatever you want. And in life, we make big decisions, and we're free to make them. We're free to decide where we want to live, where we want to work, where we want to go on vacation. Do you remember vacations? They were great. Who we want to fall in love with, who we want to marry, who we want to have children with. What will I buy a new car? Big choices, but you're free to make them any day you want. And then we make loads of small, tiny choices every day. And we're free to make those too. So what sandwich will I have for lunch? Will I have a beer with my friends, or will I go home? And little tiny hundreds and hundreds of choices you make every day, but you're free to make them. What happens when you're not free? What happens when you're no longer allowed to do what you want to do, go where you want to go, buy what you want to buy, or use that channel, physical stores closed? What happens? What happens to you after decades and decades of being free? You're suddenly captivated. You're a captivated consumer. We're all now slaves to a virus. We're slaves to this, and we're going to be slaves to this virus from a business point of view, but also from a consumer point of view for quite some time. So that brings us into looking at the grief cycle. If any of you have ever lost somebody, either heartbreak or through loss, you've gone through this process. You've gone from denial to anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance, but you've also, of course, gone backwards and forwards. This is a yo-yo. It's not really a cycle. It's more of a kind of you ebb and flow through the grief cycle. And remember, consumers are also at this place. Originally, it was kind of denial. It was, this will be a few weeks, it'll be fine. Then there was anger about all these freedoms taken away from us. Then the bargaining started. That's not so bad. We'll find. I'll go around the rules. And then there was a bit of depression. And then we accepted it was the way it was going to be because it was going to be an end. But now we've gone backwards into the second phase. We're back in this cycle. People are scared. And fear is a really interesting, powerful force that affects consumers. Of course, global recession happens because of fear. People worry that they might lose their job. They might worry that they mightn't have enough money, and then they stop spending, they start saving, and they stop spending. The spending causes the recession, and then the recession loses employment, and then what they were worried about is caused by their very fact that they stop spending. And so it's crazy. Fear is a weird thing. I've started to study fear a lot in the last 6 months, and I love even the physiology of fear. Like, you can't stop fear taking over your physical body, for instance. It's fascinating. So when you think about the last time you stood behind a door and you jumped out at someone as they came towards you, you've all done that. You've all had it done to you. And two things will happen to you that you cannot control. You will likely make a sound. You will scream, you'll shout, because in nature, that's your defensive mechanism to either scare the attacker away or to attract help. And so you can't stop that. You can't not shout if someone really scares you. And secondly, your hands are likely to fly into your body to protect your head, to protect your chest, where all your organs are. So you'll see when you scare someone, their hands go up to protect, and the shout happens. And my point about this is that you can't stop fear. Have a watch of some of these things actually happening on the Ellen show in terms of fear.
12,000. So now you're saying so nothing will scare you anymore. Nothing.
So my point here is that you can't stop fear. Fear is an inherent process in us as humans. And sometimes we know the shape of the fear. So think about hurricane season. So hurricane season, we're kind of just coming out the end of it now, aren't we? So in the States, the Caribbean, hurricane is scary. There's a certain amount of uncertainty, but actually there's also a certain amount of certainty. We know the shape of hurricane season. We know what to do when hurricane season's coming. We board up our houses and we buy our hurricane pack, our torches and our water. So we kind of know the shape of what to do. But in the pandemic, when the pandemic landed, we had no certainty. The fear was uncertain. It was completely kind of looking into a vacuum. And that's why people went crazy and bought loads of toilet paper. They felt like they had to do something. They had to do something to kind of get ready for the pandemic. And toilet paper became the thing. It became, a hunter-gatherer. We have to do something, so let's gather toilet paper. It was complete nonsense. I wrote a whole blog about the toilet paper apocalypse and what drove it psychologically. And so what this brings us to is the customer experience that you and your store as a retailer or as a brand that you need to help your retailer with. Customer experience has got more difficult in the recent pandemic because people are angry. Just full stop. They're angry at life. They're angry at the world. They're angry at society. They're angry at their governments. They're uncertain. They're scared. And even if the fear isn't top level, it's very subconscious. And so if you're out of stock of something in your store, people are going to react in a stronger way than they otherwise would have before. Maybe people want everything perfect. They want to be safe. So fear is huge. So you have to be proactive in this as a retailer, as a supplier, as a manufacturer, as an industry commentator. Even you have to be proactive in terms of what you do, how you can help consumers. Don't wait for them to come to you. You need to really not make them walk through this big maze of problems. You need to help them cut through, help them get what they want so fast. So the question on freedoms is, how are you going to give them some freedom? They want control. They yearn for control. And this could be as simple as if I'm doing up a bathroom in my house and it's going to cost me maybe 8,000 euros, 10,000 euros to do the full thing, tiling and bathroom, everything. Maybe I don't have that money right now. Maybe I'm worried. So maybe I need a payment plan. Maybe I need a payment plan for my DIY store. Maybe you don't do payment plans. Maybe you should. So look at freedoms. How can you give me more control? How can you give me more certainty? And if you can do that somehow, then consumers they'll breathe a little bit, and they'll relax a little bit. So maybe it's about click and collect, maybe it's about deliveries, maybe it can be loads of things that you can actually execute for your brand and for your business here. But you got to think, how can we give our consumers more control? How can we make them feel a little bit more free, that they're in control, because they're feeling lost? The second value I want to talk about is kind of broadly associated with the first, and it's about attachment. Because remember, when people are emotionally vulnerable, they tend to attach themselves. So again, a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness. Even if, by the way, you're living with your partner and your family, you're still lonely because you're not able to go and do the things you used to do socially. You're not allowed to travel, and the work events are cancelled, and there's still a loneliness. So we're still yearning for belonging and some kind of form of attachment, which I'm going to talk about in the third value on community. But I started studying Stockholm Syndrome also, because you're all familiar with Stockholm Syndrome, this idea that if you were kidnapped, you actually end up emotionally attaching yourself to your kidnapper. And that's because when you're emotionally vulnerable, you tend to jump into the arms of whoever is around you. And because the only person who's around you is your kidnapper, you actually end up forming a positive relationship with the person who's causing you pain. And that's natural because you want to attach when you're scared. And again, as I said, people are scared. So because all these feelings are there for us, helplessness and loneliness and anxiety and boredom and isolation, we're looking to attach ourselves. And the question is, who do we attach ourselves to? This is the opportunity for brands and businesses to build the kind of loyalty that you would only ever dream of. That might take you 5 or 10 years in the past to get to. So some people attach themselves to retail therapy. Let's face it, during the lockdown, lots of money was spent. Another Amazon package, holy crap. So people spent lots of money. People got addicted to gambling, which is scary, trapped in your own home. People got they attached to Zoom as a platform. Look at the share price of Zoom. And even if you had invested halfway through the pandemic, we were talking about the huge rise in the share price in April and May for Zoom. Even if you had invested then after the rise, you still would have doubled your money. So people got attached. They were socializing on Zoom and they were doing work stuff on Zoom. And then, interesting, again, remember, people want to take control, that idea of autonomy and fear. So what do they try and control? Well, they try and control their mental health by running and by fitness and by meditating. They try to control their financial health and making sure that they weren't overspending. But environmental control, a lot of people, and this is a huge bump for the industry, tried to control their gardens and their homes. What do you do when you're locked in for 6, 8, 10 months? Well, you improve the spare room, you improve the kitchen, you decide to do the garden, and we're still in that space where people are looking for control, and they're looking to control the things that they can control. And the things they control are often their environments that they spend time in. And because now we often work and live in the same environment, huge opportunity for the industry. This is a huge opportunity if we sell this right, and to give people control and to make them happy in their environments. And let's face it, the work environment and the home environment have kind of collided for lots of people. And again, this gives us huge opportunity for us to actually position our industry to the average end user consumer in terms of improving their space and their environment. And this is all about, attachment is all about relationships. And relationships between a brand and a consumer are no different than they are person to person. This is about holding your consumer's hand, understanding what they need. And in terms of engagement, I think I need to bring you to this ladder of understanding of where you need to be on this ladder. At the bottom there is indifference. And when you're indifferent, so think about a personal relationship, a friend of yours, a partner, an ex, if they're indifferent to you, no one wants to be in a relationship with someone who's indifferent, who doesn't really care about your suffering or pain. And if you're a retailer or a brand and you're indifferent to your consumer, then good luck, because success isn't going to be yours in the next 5 or 10 years. The next level up is pity. When you pity someone, you acknowledge that they're suffering, but you don't do anything about it. That's that moment where you call a call center or a bank and they say, oh, yeah, okay, I understand your problem. Yeah, no, we can't do anything. Well, then, no use to me. You pity me. You understand my problem, but you actually don't want to solve it. The next level up is sympathy. You care about their suffering. And at least there's an emotional engagement piece there. You care that they're in pain. You care that they're suffering. But then the next level up is empathy, where not only do you care, but you feel their suffering. Maybe you've shared it in the past. Maybe you really understand what they mean, because you're all going through it too. And that's the great thing about the pandemic. We're all going through it together. But until you get to the top, there is where you really start to get good customer experience. You have compassion if you want to relieve their suffering. Compassion inherently has an action associated with it. You do something to acknowledge, not only are you acknowledging the suffering, you're feeling their pain, but you're actually doing something to relieve it. Unless you as a business are being, I call this compassionate commerce, unless you're looking for ways along the customer journey, along the customer experience to relieve some of the customer suffering, then you know what, you're down here in pity and indifference. What's the point? So this is your opportunity to emotionally engage with your customers in new ways that shows them that you're there for them. So think about this. Are we relieving their suffering in any way? And if the answer is no, then you're not emotionally engaged in the way you should be. I think as all the dust settles on this pandemic, what we're going to see is that really human connection is going to be one of the most important things left in society. And you as a brand or business and a retailer needs to kind of have that feeling for people when they enter a store. You need to be there for them. You need to help them with their DIY project. You need to help them with their dreams. But I don't believe that DIY is ever a project. It's a dream, isn't it? It's I want my house to look this, and my home, and my garden, and family. And you want a nice home for your family. It's not a house, it's a home. And so, that human connection value is what we really need to bring to light. And so ask yourself, what are you going to do, action-based, that's compassionate, that's going to allow the uncertain, fearful consumer to attach to you in a way that will lock them into using your store, lock them into using your brand for the next 5 or 10 years. Because the people that form good emotive attachments now as a brand will win long term during this emotionally vulnerable stage for consumers. The third value I really want to talk about is community. And again, if your pen has fallen down, by the way, now is the time to take it back up again. Keep that pen in your hand. How do these apply to you and your business, to the DIY industry? So community and love and belonging is a core value of humanity. We need inherently to belong to a group of people. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you remember this? Maybe you studied it in psychology, in university, or management. Very simple. You satisfy your base needs first for food and water and shelter and sleep. And then you have safety needs to make sure you're not eaten by lion. But in modern day, will be employment and health. And then love and belonging is next. If you don't have that need, then nothing else matters. You need friendship, you need to belong, family, and we belong in so many ways. So think about this: if you washed up on a desert island tomorrow, the first thing you wouldn't do is meditate. You would look for shelter and food and water. You satisfy the basic needs. But the love and belonging piece that would be missing for you would be really hugely impactful if you had nobody else to be with. So that love and belonging is there because it's a very, very strong, fundamental core human need. And we're a tribal people as humans. And today in modern society, we have all the modern tribes. We have our families, our modern tribe, and then we have our work family. We'd also have our social families. So maybe you play with a rugby team, or you go to yoga class, or you play tennis in a club. And then you've got your digital tribes, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, and your Pinterest, and your Twitter. So we make these tribal belongings everywhere still. But of course, during the pandemic, we feel a bit like we've come off our anchor. We don't have those tribes to do our stuff with. And we saw it being replicated beautifully in Italy on the balconies. You saw that tribal behavior. You saw in the NHS with the UK, everyone clapping for the NHS frontline workers. Lovely tribal community belonging. There was that moment when Germany flew. Germany had such low cases in the beginning, and they flew people who were suffering from coronavirus from Italy, who were really overrun, into their country. Imagine importing the virus into the hospitals in Germany to help. People were helping each other, country to country. And then people locally were helping each other. Here's someone offering free cactuses to people out on a walk. This is a little boy. Read that. It's so beautiful. My name is Austin. I'm 9 years old. I live in Richfield. It's in the US, in Connecticut. I play the violin. I'm happy to come to your house, a 9-year-old kid, to play Happy Birthday and a few other songs for anyone who's got a birthday during quarantine. I'd be outside, social distancing. I'm doing this because I think music makes people happy, and I didn't have my birthday either. And so, the idea a 9-year-old boy said he'd come and play Happy Birthday on your lawn for you. They're trying to help each other in the community. We saw so much of it. This guy, an Albanian guy in Italy, saying, look, I came here 10 years ago as a refugee. You welcomed me into the country. Now it's my turn to give something back here. Please take some fruit and veg for free. And my favorite example, I think, was this maths teacher. There's this girl, doing online schooling, trying to understand geometry, not really getting it, a bit confused. The teacher drives into his pickup truck, drives around to her house, and through the window tries to explain the maths problem. That's community, and that's what we need to get to from a branding point of view and a connection when I talk about attachment. And so we saw community everywhere, and then commercial people, of course, got involved. Brewdog, which is a Scottish microbrewery brand of beer, offered everyone a beer in the world once this is all over. All you did, download the Facebook voucher. And of course, it was a great global sampling for them. Anywhere their beer was available, you could go and get a beer. And basically, they were there for you. There's this pub in Glasgow that actually delivered beer to its consumers during lockdown. Just try and keep that relationship going. And that's what you need to think about. As a retailer, I think we often think about our stores as places where people buy product. That's wrong. You should have a relationship with the customer. But we need to really focus on a lifetime relationship these days, not transactional relationship. So you need to invest in community. And IKEA released their meatball recipes, so people could have meatballs when IKEA was closed. That's the kind of thing that gets community going. They're big brand examples of how they used community. Even the adult entertainment brand rebranded as stayhome.com or whatever to flatten the curve, giving premium services for free. Lots of commercial interest got involved in this idea of community. So you need to ask yourself, how are you going to contribute to community? How do you build community? And actually, the DIY industry is great. Not only do we have our own community of experts, but there's also, of course, a huge consumer community about DIY and stories being shared and projects being shared. And we need to get into that space. And we need to really support that space right now in terms of community and give people that sense of community. Use the stores as a place where people feel not only that they belong, but they're part of the project and they can help. And it's really important to leverage community. And the last value I want to talk about is the digital step jump that we've all gone through. We've just had basically a global digital training course of every generation. And even though digital transformation was up, we were already doing everything in our lives digitally anyway. It was a mobile first world, but now that digital transformation has gone up this way, straight up like a rocket. I mean, this is my favorite viral from last year, just to show you how fascinated we all are, and how much we live in our little devices. This is a clip from a security footage in a cafe in Brazil. And the cafe is about to be held up at gunpoint. I want you to watch the guy in the grey. You might need to move me because I'm blocking him, depending on where you put my screen on the screen. So he comes in, and there's this guy on his phone there at the end of the grey t-shirt. And all he's doing is, he's no idea this guy is holding up the cafe. No idea at all. He's just on his phone, Candy Crush, Tinder, WhatsApp, whatever. And only when the guy walks out of the place with the gun does he look up and think, why are you on the floor? What's happening? And then realizes, whoa, what happened? This idea that we're so digitally immersed. And when this pandemic first started, one of my staff members, her mother, within a few days of learning how to use Zoom, was teaching other women how to crochet. Like she had become, and this woman is like in her 70s, this woman had become a digital tutor. Like, how does that work? You can take an older generation who so quickly got into the digital technology. And this for me was a really tipping point. Everybody was online grocery shopping. I mean, that was the sleeping giant that was there for years. All those click and collect models and all the online stuff, suddenly everyone knew it was there, but maybe only 10% were using it, 20%, and suddenly, boom, it was huge. Everyone used it. People started to get food delivered to their homes much more frequently. Will those behaviors ever go backwards? I'm unsure. People started to travel digitally instead of physically, using YouTube, using virtual reality to tour the world. Again, those behaviors now, technology was always there, but those behaviors will change forever. What really fascinated me was how quickly humans took to social digitalization. So we all have social media, but it's not really social, it's just exchanging opinions. Whereas here, for the first time, we have people literally having drinks nights, poker nights, dinner parties using digital. And remember, we're tribal people. We want that human contact. We want the hug. But actually, digital replaced it because it had to. And if you want a bigger metaphor for commerce in terms of the future that's coming, this is it. Look how easy it was to switch over and have a social life via digital. So obviously, it's quite easy to have a transactional commerce platform over to digital. So digital transformation, wherever you are on your digital transformation journey as a business, you need to double down hard because the societal norm now is digital first. I call it a phygital world, physical, digital collision. We expect the same from physical as digital in terms of speed, in terms of accuracy. We expect seamless, frictionless across all the customer journey. So you really have to have a phenomenally heavily invested digital product to support any physical assets that you have. And this is just a reality. We all worked from home during this pandemic, and that changes the nature of society again. I've just spotted the cat there. It's the most pissed off, angry cat I've ever seen. The cat's probably thinking, why are you still here? Why aren't you going to work every day like you used to? But what's the future of the office space? If we're all going to work from home, do we need so much commercial office spaces? So there's big questions going on about how digital will continuously change how we live. I think in the DIY industry, if we still keep our kind of, here we're a big box and you come to us for product, and that's very broken. So we need to have a look at how digital can help us attach to customers, how it can help us to build community, how it help us to, we have to embed digital as a double side to the coin of any physical assets that we actually have. So there are 4 values: freedom and autonomy, attachment, community, and digital step jump that you really need to look at that are really relevant right now for the consumer that you're trying to serve. But here's a wonderful formula that I've invented. Really complicated, so stay with me. T minus A equals B. What that means is talk and thinking about all this minus action is just bullshit. So these values that I presented to you today, unless you actually take those values and build them into some kind of action plan for the business in the next 6 months, then it's just a waste of time, isn't it? So we have to understand how consumers, what they want and how they want to live their lives with purpose, as opposed to make action plans for our businesses. So the 5 big takeaways I want you to think about. Firstly, promote freedom and make them be in control. So design everything around them, the product, the process, everything should be around them. Give them control. Be proactive with that, with your business, with your customers. Don't wait for them. Pivot the business, make it more agile. Think about those Sweet Farm earlier on, the Teddy's and the French Cafe, the Vertical Concert. These are businesses that are being proactive and are thinking about what their customers want and not being responsive. You need to connect with authenticity and heart to be part of that community that I talked about. So if you're looking for attachment, emotional attachment and community, you need to do something. You need to be compassionate. You need to actually relieve their suffering by action. So think about what you can do with authenticity, with heart, with connection to make them attached to you as a brand and business. Make sure you have a fully digital business and you invest heavily in digital, and look at that. It's not only a channel in terms of selling, a commercial channel, but it's also obviously a communication channel and social media. Make sure all that is really sparkling in terms of digital today. And then think about the recovery. So that now then and when strategy I talked about earlier on, that current recovery, it's going to be maybe a bit more roller coaster. So how are we going to build agile businesses over the next 6 weeks, 6 months? How do we keep changing? How do we build change into the business? These are big thoughts that we need to have a think about. A lot of that content I've talked to you about now is there in a lot more detail on my blog. I'm aware, in 45-minute kind of sessions, only so much I can say. But if you're interested in the psychology of consumers, the psychology of what's happening post-pandemic, how that affects the DIY industry, jump onto my blog anytime you want. kenhughes.info/blog is the answer, or is the URL. And in each of those blogs, there is detailed understanding of what's going on. And so some of those would be useful. You subscribe to the blog if you want to get the newsletter every month. And in that newsletter, you'll have kind of series of videos and blogs to kind of keep your inspiration going, as will indeed this platform, of course. If you're too lazy to read, of course, the YouTube channel is there for you, and all the blogs are there in video form too, so you can have a quick 5-minute look at the video. I promise it won't be 45 minutes like this one. And also in terms of continuing the conversation with me, in terms of understanding consumers, you can always hit me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all the usual places. Ken Hughes, IE, is my own tag. And we're going to take some questions now in a moment for those of you watching live, which is fantastic. Just a quick note on the next content. So this first webinar, I'm the host, but I also obviously was here to present, which is a great honor. The next series of sessions, I'm going to just host and Q&A. We've divided the content into 2 streams. There's the webinar stream, which is this one, the thought leadership piece, which is kind of just inspiration. There's also a fantastic set of interviews with John Herbert, who I'm sure all of you know. And the next 2, just put in your diary, if you want to diary these in, is the 21st of October and the 4th of November. And 21st of October is an interview with Sergio Giraldi, CEO of Obi. And also obviously he's heavily involved in industry associations all over the world. And then on the 4th of November, you've got an interview with Werner de Jager, hope I've said that right. And again, those CEO interviews are really, this is what's happening at the top level. And so those interviews are going to be great. So make sure you either tune in live or certainly on demand, go in and look at those, because these are the people who have been in the industry, who know the industry inside and out, and therefore discussing those challenges and discussing how the businesses like Cashbuild and Obi are actually using and pushing through these challenges. I think is really important for us all to understand. Back on my side then, the next session with me between now and Christmas, we have 2 more fantastic webinars for you to watch. On the 9th of November, I had the huge honor of hosting a session with Rick Vera. If you don't know Rick, if you haven't come across Rick before, Rick is a phenomenal powerhouse in terms of thought, where a business is going. He's an author, he's a thought leader, he's a business disruptor. His sessions are really humanistically insightful. Honestly, I can't say enough about Rick. I've met him a few times on stage. Every time I've listened to him at conferences, I've come away with reams of notes and a better understanding of how life works, not to mind how business works. So I will really encourage you to tune in live to that on the 9th of November. And this December session then with me is with Stefano Bottler from Euromonitor. So again, this is our ability to use Euromonitor to look at the challenges and opportunities of COVID from the outside, and look at all the research and the data and what's happening. So those 2 webinars, and obviously we have a webinar every single month between now and June for the Global DIY Summit. So this is going to be your monthly piece of inspiration. So whether you're watching live or whether you're on demand viewing, you're more than welcome. So I'm going to jump out of this session. I'm going to go back to live screen, and there I am live screen to see, do we have any questions that have come in during the chat? Because I know some of you are watching live and some of you are on demand. So obviously if you're watching on demand, you don't get to ask a question, do you? Because that's not the way time works until we warp the time continuum. So there's a couple of questions, which is great, so I'll deal with them one by one. First one here, anonymous, so I don't see who it's from. Are consumers tired of COVID? Yes, short answer, absolutely. I think what's happening in terms of their jadedness, I think the first phase we all got through, we all learned it was very uncertain. But now, are we tired? Yeah, I think we're very tired. As these second lockdowns, the second shelterings come our way, and people are still uncertain as to when the end point, because there's no end to this, there's no date that's been given to us, there's a vacuum. And are people tired? Yeah. And from a customer experience point of view, that gives us huge challenges, because people only have a certain amount of energy, I think, to bring to solution solve their own lives. So I think they are tired, and that brings us as businesses more challenges. We need to keep the smiles going, you know. So the actual, at the simple level in a store environment, it's always important to have a nice positive customer experience. But now I think it's really important. The people walking through the doors, they're tired, they're worried, they're anxious. And so if our staff need to really bring it, and also our staff, of course, are worried, and there's the health ramifications for working in a store where people are coming in. So there's all these factors going on. And I think it does bring a certain tiredness to retail. I think it's our job in retail then to energize and to engage, and that's why the attachment and the community stuff they talk about are so important. You know, if consumers are tired, it's our job to kind of to help them along and to buoy them up. And we've got Christmas coming up, and there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do in our stores that helps bring the joy. So I think they are tired is the short answer. Okay, Steve, question for Steve: do you have any personal experience with DIY during the COVID crisis? Personal experience. Yes, actually, let me tell you a story. Here's one. I wrote a blog actually on the psychology of the queue, psychology of queuing, and how queues have become a negative start to a retail experience because of consumers having to queue to get into store. And I did go to a large big box DIY store at one point during the summer, and I had a garden plan. I was going to buy some gardening plants. And the queue was quite long to get into the store. It's a big box store. It was a Saturday, Sunday. You know, I made the mistake like everyone going on the busy day. And it took me about an hour to queue to get into the store to get what I needed. What annoyed me as a consumer was that in this queue, there was everybody queuing for bathroom, for DIY, for garden. But inside the store, the garden section, of course, was completely separate and outside, in fact, of the store. So instead of opening a side gate and having a separate queue just for garden, where people like me could just go in and get the garden product and leave, I had to queue for an hour to get into the entire store. And that, to me, showed a retailer who didn't get it, who didn't understand, hang on, what can we do here to be more flexible? How can we really understand what's happening in this queue? And how can we break the queue into three, maybe? Can we have someone running down the queue? I met a guy in the garden center who had queued for an hour to get into the store, and the store didn't have the product he needed. And he was so angry. And I thought, why aren't they running down the queue with click and collect tablets? And they say, actually, no, we don't have that in stock. There's no point in queuing for an hour. Or actually, we have it in stock. I'll just go and get it for you and bring it out, and we can do the transaction here, maybe, sir. You know, those ways of making it more efficient. So I think we need to look at ways to make the experience much more involved and enjoyable for our customers. And lastly, we take one last question because I'm aware we've gone on quite a long time. What is the new normal looking like for 20? It's a crystal ball question. What is the new normal looking like for 2021? I'll be honest, who knows? Do you know what? Actually, let's leave that question float until Rick Virak joins us next month. Rick is a much better guy at predicting the future than I am. I think the new normal as an idea kind of resonates with people yearn to get back to the old ways. I think that's broken. We don't want to go back to the old ways anyway. There was many things wrong with the business models that we were running for the new digital transformation society that we have today. But I think what will our new normal be? I think it's ours to shape. And as a business executives, we're in an industry here where we get to shape that new normal. Obviously, consumers will have their values, and if we embed those well into our businesses, we will have businesses that will be future-proof for the next 10 years, which ultimately is what this global DIY network is all about. It's about us coming together as executives, using thought leaders to inspire, using our own people inside the industry as CEOs, whatever, to tell us how they're coping with the challenges, and to have the debate and discussion for the next 6 months until we all meet for those 3 days in Copenhagen in June, to understand how we're going to get through this together. So just like community is a strong value for consumers, it also is a fantastic value for us as an industry association. And I think a huge thanks and congratulations to the group at the Global DIY Summit for building this amazing platform that allows us to have these sessions and also to have peer-to-peer conversations, meetings and chats with all people all over the world, retailers, manufacturers, thought leaders, and to have these debates and discussions for the next 6 months. I think it's a fantastic piece of kit, and the platform, the app is amazing. I obviously present a lot on these platforms in the current times, and this one, trust me, it's one of the best ones I've seen. So huge congratulations to the team at Global DIY Summit for putting this together. Thank you guys for watching the very first episode of the Global DIY Network webinar. See you back for Rick's episode in a month's time, and also tune in for the 2 CEO interviews in the next few weeks. It's been an honor to host the first one, and I look forward to hosting the next 6, and I look forward to seeing you all on the 9th and the 11th to the 11th of June in Copenhagen 2021. I'm Ken Hughes. Until next time, see ya.